Hello, everyone, and welcome into the 18th episode of the Big Ten Watchdog News podcast, episode 4 for season 2 of the 2023-24 season. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Graham Dinas.
And I'm Taylor Seamer.
Before we jump into the episode, we've got a lot to talk about. We're reviewing Feast Week this week, as well as after a pretty slow week of games in the Big Ten, we've got some big hitters coming up the next week and a half. So we're gonna preview those. But before we get into it, just want to tell everyone to give this video a like and a subscribe. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. If you listen to us on any one of our other platforms, if it's Apple or Spotify, make sure to give us a like there and a follow as well. All of the links for each of those are available in the description. And once again, if you're listening on a certain platform, I'd advise everyone to try out, YouTube or podcasting platform. I'd advise everyone to try out one of each just to see, whichever one's more convenient. Also, definitely make sure to follow us on Twitter. Big month ahead, the month of December, for the Big Ten Watchdog Newsboys on Twitter. And then finally, make sure that you give us a follow on TikTok as well. Once we get into Big Ten play, those videos will start coming out more frequently with clips from the podcast and some editorial stuff that we'll do, one-off videos and stuff like that, fun stuff on TikTok. So make sure you give us a follow on all those. And wherever you're watching this, all of those links will be available in the description of the video at the link tree. You click on the link provided and it'll bring you to a tree where you can visit any one of those websites. All right, let's get into the Big Ten ball now. Starting with Purdue, obviously the team of the Big Ten right now, winning the Maui Invitational, the most loaded Maui Invitational field maybe ever, probably ever, getting 3 essentially top 10 wins. Gonzaga came into the tournament at number 11, but beating Gonzaga, followed by Tennessee and then Marquette, all on a neutral site. Obviously, just an absolute buzzsaw. They had the toughest schedule for sure. Gonzaga is definitely the hardest round 1 opponent as well. Just what are your thoughts on Purdue, Maui? I'm gonna just kind of open the floor.
Purdue is going to run the Big Ten out of their respective buildings every night. Purdue is clearly the best team in the conference by far, and the Maui tournament proved that. Or maybe Gonzaga, Tennessee, and Marquette are just actually bad and nobody wants to admit it, but I don't think that's the case.
That's not
I think
the case.
Purdue just mollywopped 3 solid, deep tournament teams. So it now becomes a race for second place for everybody in the conference. I am convinced of that.
See, now we do this every year, though. This is the 3rd consecutive year that Purdue has been the number 1 team in the country before December. And each year, the Big Ten kind of gets to them. 2 years ago, they went 14-6. Last year, they went 15-5. Do we think that that's something that's going to happen again? And if it is that more of an indictment on Purdue or on Big Ten basketball as a whole? Because I was going to get into that in another debate.
I think that goes more to just say that the Big Ten, like home court environments, are just so crazy across the league that it's hard to go on the road to places and win, even when you're the better team. So I think it's mostly a testament to the Big Ten. It's nearly impossible to win every game you play, even if you play perfect basketball. There's going to be one team who just shoots really well or doesn't turn the ball over, or both in a night. And so even with 4 or 5 losses, they're going to win the Big Ten easily by 3 or 4 games.
I think so too. I think there's going to be a lot of cannibalism, especially in that middle tier of the conference, just like last year. The argument is it's not necessarily false hope per se, but the Big Ten, just like the Big Ten schedule, is built to kind of wear teams out at this point, just like the style of play. We talk about this, the officiating, all last year. And it just wears teams out before March. And I'm just hoping this Purdue team is better than the last 2. And that won't happen, but I'm cautiously optimistic of that. I kind of feel like I don't think this team's losing to a 16 seed again, but I don't know as much as I want to say like this team should win it all, I'm just not certain that that's going to be the case with how the Big Ten has been the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, Big Ten teams for the past, since 2000 have struggled in um, March, but I think that is because they're so physically exhausted from playing Big Ten Gauntlet from January to through the beginning of March. Then they play the Big Ten tournament, and then they have to go straight into March and play these teams who are playing, in comparison, non-difficult schedules. So yeah, I don't think that they're our best shot to get deep in the tournament, I think easily, but I still don't know that they can win it all.
Speaking on the Big Ten tournament, you kind of blew up with one of our tweets on a Rothstein news break that the Big Ten tournament in the future, when it expands to 18, may only see 14 or 15 teams instead of all 18 make the tournament. And I feel like that's just like a huge disgrace, right?
Well, that's just awful. Like they already play an extra day because they have the two spots for the, 13-14 place game or whatever. I don't know. They can just play two more games on that same day and fill everybody in.
I'm
Can they
trying to think.
not? So
So if that was the case, you would have teams.
you would have four more teams, which is 18.
Yeah, you'd have 7 through 18 playing. Right. So that'd be 6 games in one day, which I don't think they can do. So that's one
They currently
option.
just play the first two games
Mhm.
on Wednesday of the week.
Tuesday.
They could just
put on, right? Is it Tuesday?
or on Tuesday. I thought it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
You might
Is
be
it
right.
not? So why can't they just add two more games to Wednesday and just play 4 games, 2 games, 1 game, or
Yeah.
whatever however it goes. I don't know why they can't. Or then be 4, 4, 4, 2, 1. And you would still have people with double buys.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have the same setup. It was just a couple more lower teams play more early week games.
If you wanted to go for the old Big East, they had 16 teams. It's not technically the old Big East, but the last iteration of the Big East before everyone left. They had 16 teams, and so they played 9 through 16 played. That's 4 games, and then you'd go teams with single bye, teams with a double bye, and then the semis in the final. So that'd be 5 games in 5 days. If we wanted to do that, we would need an extra day on the front end of that with teams 15 through 18 all playing. And that would be 6 games in 6 days for one of the bottom 4 teams in an 18-team conference to win, which that will never happen anyway. But
right, it's not going to happen anyways. But
it is. You were talking about how much of a buzzsaw the Big Ten tournament is, and we're adding 4 more teams into it. It's just going to be more games and even more of a buzzsaw.
Well, not really. It's an extra game for teams who are already bad and weren't going to win it anyways.
True.
The top tier teams are still getting the double bye or a single bye.
Yeah, it'd be.
But I just feels wrong to leave teams out of a conference tournament if you're in that conference.
There are
if it's truly a conference tournament, you have to let everybody in the conference have a chance at winning the tournament. There's
some low major conference tournaments that don't include everyone, which I've never really understood. But for a Power 5 conference to do that would be kind of crazy, I feel like. Especially with how much these moves and these realignments have to do with finances and how much money these extra teams are going to bring in. I'd be shocked if the conference wanted to turn down extra tournament games, right? I don't know. That's just a thought.
It's already the premier tournament before the tournament anyways. I mean, they're the last tournament to finish on Selection Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
They finish, oftentimes they run into Selection Sunday time, and Selection Sunday has to be delayed because the game is still going on. And they get the most teams in every year. So it's clearly the best. I don't know why TV networks wouldn't want more of it anyways, but I mean, it's on BTN, I guess, but you could I don't know.
That being said, just in general about the landscape of college basketball, but with this mega Big Ten and SEC, and the Big 12 is going to have 16 teams next year, right? Is it? Yeah. I don't know how the tournament's gonna work. Like you have these auto bids. Is the Big Ten gonna get 11, 12, 13 teams in? Or are they gonna start getting more mid majors with good regular seasons because there are less power teams to let in? I'm excited and curious to see how the committee goes about
Well,
that process next year.
you take a conference that has Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, Ohio State, Indiana,
Purdue,
and you throw in Purdue, you throw in you throw in
UCLA.
Ohio, UCLA, or Oregon, I mean, Washington, like they're all like power teams. You can't,
Yeah,
I don't know. They would be making the tournament in the Pac-12,
they will
and they're going to be
exactly.
playing.
That's what I
So they
because
would
I mean
just take the
obviously
Pac-12 spots and add them on to where respectively wherever those teams are going, I think.
okay. I think that's a possibility. I also could see, more cannibalism inside the conferences, and that opens the door for mid majors with good regular season schedules to get at larges. That's kind of what I hope happens. I'm just, a mid major guy at heart, but that's kind of the route I hope they take. But either way, it's going to be roughly the same tournament. But
I
it's
don't know
just
why I don't know
interesting
why
without
anybody would
Pac-12.
ever want to root for less basketball games. Basketball is like a gift from the gods, okay? Like why would you want less?
That being said, I want to know your stance on NCAA tournament expansion to 96. Are you in favor of that then? Because I'm not.
No, I'm
Okay.
not.
I'm not either.
And I feel like it's different in that regard because if you expand to 96, then the tournament has no meaning because everyone just gets in and like you might as well not play regular season. You might as
You're
well just
letting in
show up in
the
March.
you're letting in the entire NIT field is what that
Yeah.
does. And that's I mean, I feel like the bubble line, there are already teams that get into this tournament that don't belong in an at-large spot. And you're going to add 32 teams that are less qualified. I'm not a fan of that. But again, like I'm not going to turn down more basketball, but
Well,
like
but those games aren't games that are going to be added because those games that will be played are just already being played in the NIT. So you're not adding or subtracting basketball games, the
no.
quantity of
Well,
games.
I think the NIT would still exist too, and then that product would plummet as well,
Oh, it
right?
would be awful.
Yeah,
you'd be having the bottom of the valley is like
you would
getting
have
into the
you'd have like 10 top 100 teams in that tournament. If 96 teams are getting in, you'd have maybe like 20 teams. Like the 80 best
yeah.
teams in college basketball would all be in the field. That's too many.
I
Anyway, kind of got off on
100%
a
agree.
tangent there. I enjoy getting off on tangents. I've said this on the podcast before. I wish that we were less rigid and can get off on more tangents, but we have so much to talk about, especially doing podcasts every 2 weeks instead of every week, which we'll start getting into a weekly podcast later in the season. But let's move along to your Wolverines. 1-2 trip in Atlantis, but it's again another good field. Memphis is good. Texas Tech is probably pretty good. You beat Stanford, who I thought looked better than Arkansas whenever they played. But 1-2 probably not what you wanted. I'm just gonna again open the floor to you because you watched it closer than I did.
No, I was looking for 2-1, to be honest. I
Uh,
didn't think we'd really win this tournament, especially without I mean, Phil's a great coach, but he doesn't have like the same relationship to the players that Jawan does. Um,
I want to know what the
and
dynamic was because Jawan was on the bench, right? I saw him.
yeah, he was
What
on the
was he
bench,
doing?
but he's technically in like an advisory or like off court role, technically, or like just an observer while he's recovering.
Okay.
Um, so like he can't, I'm sure he wants to get up and like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, take action during the games, but like his doctor has advised him that that is not good for his health. So he has to just like sit there and he can like say things in timeouts, but he's not supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
like yelling and,
Yeah.
arguing and all the stress of a normal, when he's trying to coach the games and call a game. So, but the word is as of this week, he's coming back as an assistant coach kind of a role now. So
Okay.
he's moving
Up
like
the
back
ladder.
up to
Yeah.
getting there as he goes through his recovery process for the surgery that he had. But back to Atlantis. This Michigan team is really good on offense
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
and really bad on defense. And so if you get teams who like play good defense and limit your offense to 60 points instead of 80 points, you're gonna get beat every night because you cannot win Power Five Division One basketball games scoring 60 points. Um, so that's their biggest problem is that they can score when the other team has bad defense, but when the other team plays good defense, they can't score enough on the good defense for what their Michigan's bad defense gives up on
Yeah,
every night.
that I feel like that goes against. I may have said this on the last episode. That goes against what I would have predicted for this Michigan team. I feel like if you whip out a starting five that includes Namari Burnett, Terrence Williams, Olivier Nkamwa, and Terrace Reed, that group would be better defensively and not elite at scoring. But when your best player is Doug McDaniel, I mean, Doug's a bucket. No one's going to argue with that. I feel like you're bucking the trend that was what was expected of this team. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I would have predicted.
No, and I think the first couple games of the year, first 2, 3 games, they looked like they could do it, but then it was inferior competition.
Yeah.
And so when they play, Power Five guys who can actually score, you run into some problems.
Yeah. So 4-3 now, and looking ahead, a game against Oregon, right? Tomorrow on Saturday. We're filming this on Friday. Game
Correct.
at
Game
Oregon.
Yes.
And I don't. Oregon lost to Santa Clara because they were in the same tournament as Ohio State. I don't know if they beat Bama in the third place game or not. I'm sure there will be about 11. Actually, no, because Oregon plays tonight in the Pac-12 championship, so they will be watching that game. Michigan fans might not be watching that game. Is it before?
No.
Is it an afternoon game?
I actually don't know I think it is. I think it's at like
Okay.
3:30 maybe or something, but
Okay.
I can check that. But yeah, I won't be watching it anyways because I'll be on the road.
You'll be on the
driving
way
Indy.
to Indy, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'll be driving to Indy at that time.
so yeah. But yeah, that game would be again another tough drop. I'm not saying you're going to lose. If you lose that game, sitting at 4-4, not ideal.
Speaking of
And
teams
then,
who are about to be 4-4 though,
yeah, Michigan State loses to Arizona. They fall to 500. They're 3-3. I just
I think
covered
they're
them.
4-3. Are they 3-3? I thought they were 4-3.
Who did they beat most recently? They fell to 3-3. Did they play another game after Arizona?
I
I'm
think
sure
they
they
might
have.
have.
They've
I
had
can
all
try and
week.
check this.
There's no way they would have. They didn't lose another game. Taking
Yeah,
a
they're
look
4-3.
at their schedule. Do they have any important games this week? They host Wisconsin on Tuesday. That's one that we'll preview here later. Do you think that this Michigan State team is a top 4 Big Ten team still? You still think they're high end and they've had a tough schedule, or is it time to push the panic button?
They need some better offense, specifically outside scoring, to have a solid chance. I know they've been better at it recently, but those first 3 or 4 games, they were like less than like 15% from behind the line, which is not going to win you any games in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, you need more than Tyson Walker, and we've harped on this the last couple episodes. Tyson Walker has been putting up fine offensive numbers, but you need is a second guy that is capable of scoring as well. And I think Jaden Akins probably needs to be that guy. Or maybe one of the freshmen step up into that role of maybe a Jeremy Fears, or I don't know. I mean, Cohen Carr's. I mean, all those guys are averaging like 5 points a game. Akins, Malik Hall, and Hogard are all sitting right at about 10 points a game. But yeah, none of the three have like stepped up as a true second scorer.
But they're not like a 10 points a game easy. They're like a hard fought 10 points, fist fighting guys in the lane with runners and floaters, and not like open in rhythm threes and dunks in transition.
It's going to have to be Hogard that steps up, I think. I'm just looking at the numbers now. 9.6 a game, but shooting 34% from the field and 14% from three. Those numbers are due for at least a slight increase. He's going to have to be the guy that takes a step. And I think just maybe if shots start falling for Hogard, he's a 12-point-a-game scorer. But 14% from three. Malik Hall shooting 17% from three. Jaden Akins is 29. They don't have any good 3-point shooters outside of Trey Holloman coming off the bench. And that's a glaring weakness. But yeah, so you said 4-3?
Yeah,
They're
they
4-3.
just beat Georgia Southern at home.
Okay, good. I'm glad that they won that game. They needed that. But that Arizona game, Caleb Love goes for 17. I don't know. I'm gonna be honest, I was watching the Cowboys play at this time. So
Yeah, I think. Well, I knew they were. I didn't think they were going to win this game because, um,
because Arizona's really good.
Arizona went into Duke, correct, and
Yes, they
beat
went
them at Cameron,
into Cameron.
which is something that not many people do. You don't go
No,
into Cameron and beat a top 5 ranked Duke team
not often.
easily at that. It was like 7, 8, 10 points, I want to say.
I think it was 9.
So yeah, I knew that Michigan State was going to have a pretty tough time with Arizona. Arizona's legit this year. So I wouldn't be panicking off of that single game alone. But rather seeing the early season as a whole, I might be worried if I am sitting in a room in East Lansing trying to game plan what the rest of the season looks like.
Again, though, it's not like there's a ton of teams in the Big Ten that are making you think we need to get on this now. We desperately need a spark. No one is propelling themselves forward as like this conference has a lot of good teams. There's still so much time left in the season for Michigan State to prove that they're still at the top of the conference. Let's talk about some teams that won. The 2 teams, I guess we already talked about Purdue. 2 more teams that won their Feast Week tournaments, starting with Wisconsin and the Fort Myers tip-off. They held Virginia to 41 points. I watched like half of that game. And that's about what you would expect from a Wisconsin-Virginia basketball game. And then also, I believe SMU upset West Virginia. I don't know how big of an upset that really is. But SMU wins that semi, and then Wisconsin beats them in the championship. So they go 2-0 on their Feast Week.
Yeah, I think that's good for them. It was kind of a weak tournament play. I think in general, like Virginia, SMU, West Virginia, Wisconsin aren't necessarily like the biggest names in basketball.
Virginia's a good one.
I don't know. Virginia always strikes me as like they live and die by the 3, and they don't really play defense. So if you just, at least this is kind of the traditional style of Virginia basketball.
They were the defense, like they were defense in college basketball. That's kind of lightened up a bit the past couple of years since that championship team. But yeah, I get what you're saying, kind
of. So like if you can just kind of score just enough, Virginia can't really and hold them to not hitting 33s a night. I don't think Virginia is like a top, especially now. Like that year after they lost to UMBC, they would light the floor up and hold you to 40 every night.
Yeah.
But that's just not the same kind of Virginia team that we have now. So
this is another thing. This team, we were kind of wondering who would step up and be that lead scorer. No one really has. AJ Storr, the St. John's transfer, is their leading scorer at 13-3. But Wall, Hepburn, and Corral all at about 11. Connor Sejan's only playing 8.6 minutes a game, which is kind of shocking because he was on the all-freshman team last year. And so that's kind of a surprise. But yeah, I think Wisconsin fans should be optimistic about this group, I would say. I mean, they lost to Tennessee and Providence back-to-back, and since then they've won these games. They have their next 3 games, if we're going to do some schedule reading. They go home against Marquette tomorrow, which we'll talk about that one as well, at Michigan State, and then at Arizona.
I see that as 3 losses for them.
I think if they pull one of those out, they should continue to be optimistic. If they can win one of the 3.
That is quite literally maybe one of the hardest 3-game stretches any team is going to have to go through in the next year.
Outside of the Maui, right?
Sure.
Because that feels, yeah, but
I mean, you just have and 2 of them are on the road. So you have to go at Michigan State, at Arizona.
At Breslin,
Ooh.
home against the number 3 team in the country, at Breslin, and then at the number 2 team in the country.
I think that is a juggernaut slate.
It's going to be a what we call a litmus test for the
We're gonna
Wisconsin
see how much
Badgers.
regression to the mean these guys are gonna
Yeah,
have.
yeah, I love regression to the mean. Ohio State, we mentioned them earlier, also won their tournament. Technically, it was an 8-team field, but they had their first game on campus against Western Michigan, and so it was really a 4-team field. They beat Alabama in the semis, which was a good win, and then Santa Clara, like we said, upset Oregon, and so again, I think those are quality wins. This Ohio State team, I want to be confident in this Ohio State team, but last year I was confident in the Ohio State team after a good month of December, and I don't think they won a game all January. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic for this team as well. What do you think?
I think this team is much better positioned than last year's team. Last year's team just didn't flow well together. They had like one guy who could only post up and just hog the paint, and another guy who just only wanted to get steals and go dunk the ball. And it was like a weird combo, and like guys didn't flow together well. Um, the Alabama win kind of stands out to me because I thought like Alabama is a relatively solid team this year, but maybe there was just a little bit too much preseason overhype, or OSU is going to play better this year than they did last year. But either way, they need something because last year was a rough one in Columbus, and if that happens again, you might see coaches and players hit the portal.
So I've mentioned several times the freshman to sophomore leap is pretty important in the Big Ten. Just having a year of experience under your belt. And so that group last year was very, very young. And so you saw Sensabaugh go to the draft, but they're returning. Bruce Thornton's a sophomore this year, Felix Okpara, Roddy Gale, and then they add Mahaffey from Penn State, who all have a year of Big Ten play under their belt. And then you still have Zed Key coming back for what I think is year 5. And then you add Dale Bonner from Baylor, and Jamison Battle from Minnesota in the portal. I think this is a good combination of youth and experience that makes them a lot scarier than the team they were last year, even if that team last year had the more talented roster, I would say. Because that's not always what's important in the Big Ten, at least in conference play. Experience often exceeds talent.
Yeah, and you saw this in like the Beeline era at Michigan. He would get only 3-star guys, but he'd keep them for 4 years. And by the time they were juniors and seniors, they were beating these 4- and 5-star freshman players from other teams just because they knew how to handle Big Ten play.
It's going to be an art that is going to continue to fade away. We thought it was fading away with all these one and dones, and now you add the portal on top of it. People that play, like, there aren't going to be a ton of guys that play in the Big Ten for 4 years anymore. But Zed Key is one of those guys, and I think he's still coming off the bench and being a key role piece for them. I'm excited for this Ohio State team. Again, cautiously excited. I will not get burnt again. All right, Iowa. Iowa goes 1-2 in San Diego. They lose that first game to Oklahoma, who I believe snuck into the AP poll this week at 25. I might be wrong there. And then they get a win against Seton Hall on a neutral site. Probably going to be a quad 2 win. It seems about with this Iowa roster, I think you're going to see, they're going to beat Seton Hall and lose to Oklahoma. Sounds about Iowa. I don't know.
It's a similar story. They live and die by the 3-pointer because they want to beat you 110 to 100 and not 70-75. So it just depends on how many threes they can make on any night and how few the other team makes. But they've got a test on Monday. They go at Purdue 7:00. So you'll learn a lot there if they can hang, even if they don't win, if they can hang for 35 minutes. Maybe they're gonna have a little run in the Big Ten. If they only hang for 15 to 25 minutes, then maybe there should be some question marks raised in Iowa City.
Which I think that's more likely. I might be wrong. I just from watching this Purdue team, I don't see more than 3 or 4 teams that can hang with them for 35 minutes in the conference. And we'll get into that a little bit with Northwestern, I think. But yeah, so I mentioned the 3-game stretch for Wisconsin, Iowa's 3-game stretch at Purdue, rivalry game in Ames against Iowa State, and then home against Michigan. That's no slouch of a 3-game stretch either. And if they win 2 of those, they will be ecstatic. I think if they can pull out one of the Iowa State and Michigan games, that would be that's what they should be not hoping for, but not even expecting. I don't know where it lies, somewhere in between those 2 phrases.
Yeah, I think Iowa State is their better chance, but I could 100% see Michigan getting beat by 30 because Iowa just goes off for 110 that night.
Anytime it's possible against them in any game, and so be it. And now the big loser of Feast Week, Penn State has been outed as frauds. I posed the question. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I think I mentioned this earlier in the year. We can go back and find the podcast where I
You
said
did.
Penn State might be the worst team in the conference.
Victory lap for Seamer. I was excited. And again, we haven't started conference play. But they went into this field undefeated. Against a very weak schedule, and it was kind of a prove it tournament, and they didn't. They lost to A&M, which was to be expected, followed by a loss to Butler, and then Mike Rhodes, Ace Baldwin transfer from VCU, and they play VCU in this tournament.
Proceed to get clapped.
It was like 12-point loss.
Yeah,
not pretty for Penn State this weekend. Do you think that they're just cooked? Do you think that there's still hope that this team can win 8 games in conference?
It is still my understanding that they are cooked and probably the worst team in the conference.
I still don't want to say it, but because some of these teams didn't even get to see any Feast Week action, but those 3 teams are all like decent. But if you're a Big Ten team, you don't want to leave the tournament 0-3. So they're on fraud watch. We'll monitor Penn State for potential fraud, but I'm not going to make a judgment yet. So yeah, that's all the teams that played in tournaments. I think Nebraska had their own tournament that they won. So congrats to them. I checked ESPN. They do have the weakest strength of schedule of anyone in the conference so far. So they are 7-0, but they're going to be tested as well. They get Creighton coming into their building. Hot off. Who do they beat? They're playing someone in the Big 12, I think. They had a big win. I know they got crushed by Colorado State.
Yeah, that was a weird game. I didn't watch that game. I just saw the final score after. Do you know what happened in that game?
They got held under 50. I think they shot like 12% from 3. They beat Oklahoma State is who they beat, which that's a good look for SIU.
Huge look for the boys in Southern Illinois.
If they can pull that one off. I want to see the box score for this Creighton game. Not that it matters for this podcast. So yeah, tonight is Friday. We're starting conference play with a doubleheader. Maryland going into Indiana in a battle for who can make 4 threes.
Who is not the worst team to wear red in the conference?
Yeah, that might be it. I don't really want to like preview all of these games because there's so many in the next 2 weeks. It's too much to do, but I kind of just want to like run through them. The Purdue Northwestern game I am excited for. It's in Evanston. I don't think that's going to matter, but did Northwestern knock Purdue off last year? They did, right?
Yeah, Northwestern was one of Purdue's losses last year.
And
so this will be a nice way to see if Purdue can revenge that or not.
Yeah, 6 of 29. Yeah, they shot 28% from the field. Creighton did. Again, the Mountain West, just like the Big Ten, is going to dominate the regular season and come up just flat in March. That's how it's gone the last 2 years. We'll see. I'm a fan of the Mountain West. So yeah, so those are the two games today. Boo Booey. We'll see, because they're going to stick Lance Jones on him. I love Lance Jones. Watching him play for Purdue, as much as he would make
Shout out the
me,
boys at Southern Illinois.
as much as he would make me cringe at SIU at times because of his shot selection, where he can play on a team where he is the fourth option. He's the only guy on that roster that's taking guys off the bounce consistently, and he also guards on the perimeter, which is something they lacked last year. I think it's a great fit. I'm super excited that he's a quality piece on this team. But he's gonna get a real look. Not that he didn't have a real look guarding Tyler Kolek and Zakai Ziegler and all these guys in Maui, but Boo Booey is a first team All Big Ten guard last year, and now Lance Jones gets a shot at him. That'll be exciting matchup to watch. Saturday only conference game, Illinois at Rutgers. I won't lie, I'm not super scared of Rutgers, but I am scared of the rack. And so
You mean Jersey Mike's Arena?
at the rack, yes. I'm I think we're the better group, but again, I can't remember the last time Illinois won at the rack. I know we didn't last year. I don't think we did the year. I know we didn't freshman year 2 years ago. So yeah, that'll be another one that's going on during conference championship Saturday. Sunday, Minnesota at Ohio State. Looking for Ohio State to take care of business there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. But this will be the Jameson battle rematch.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Revenge game. So we'll see how that kind of added twist plays out.
I think Dawson Garcia is going to go for 35, and Minnesota might score like 58 points total.
That seems like what they do every day.
Iowa at Purdue on Monday. We talked about that one. Let's talk about Wisconsin at Michigan State more in depth. First conference game for either of these teams. Two teams that, in my opinion, look to be top 5 teams in the conference. I think this is a game that I'm very excited for. This Tuesday doubleheader is going to be exciting.
This Wisconsin-Michigan State game kind of, I think, will set the tone for both of these teams for the rest of the year. If Michigan State loses at home to Wisconsin again and would fall to 4-4, is there some worry in East Lansing that maybe they won't finish even with a double bye in the Big Ten tournament?
Team.
Will they be an 8 or 9 come March, And Wisconsin, kind of the same. They haven't really played a super tough schedule, but people think, they're talking that Wisconsin can be a top tier team this year. This would be the deciding factor for both teams, I think.
Yeah,
a good trendsetter for the rest.
A win for Wisconsin would just be massive for that team's outlook on the rest of the conference season. Michigan State, I just think that they need to win a string of games to get on track, and I think they'll be fine, but they desperately need to get on track. And so both of these teams kind of at a turning point, which is shocking to say. We're recording this on December 1st. But yeah, it's a turning point in the season on December 5th on Tuesday. And then the second game, the doubleheader that I want to talk about is Indiana at Michigan. Indiana playing their second conference game, Michigan getting their first home conference game. I don't know. I just have this game circled. I feel like whenever these two teams play, it's always a really good game. I remember last year I remember that game vaguely. I don't remember who won though.
Indiana won in overtime.
It was an overtime game. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I didn't want to be wrong. Yeah, that was a very good game because it was leading into another game. I feel like that I was curious to watch.
Yeah, I can't remember what game they played after, but I do remember this was an overtime game at Indiana.
Two teams
really frustrating because I thought
looks.
we should have played. I thought we should have won the game easily. But
as much as I have enjoyed the Indiana Michigan games the past couple of years, both of these teams are just completely different from the products that were put on the court last year.
This game is like the basketball equivalent of having to watch a Big Ten West football game. It's like it's going to be bad, but that's why you want to watch it.
Kind of, but also the Big Ten West, whenever you see the names, you kind of like groan. Whenever you see Indiana Michigan basketball, you think, okay, I can work with this. And so, but the product's probably not going to be good.
I think you can take the probably off there. It's not going to be good.
What do you think? Do you think Michigan's 1-0 in conference after Tuesday?
I like Michigan at home against a weak Indiana team.
I don't hate that. 8. Oh, it's a Peacock game. Never mind.
I will be in
Paywall.
attendance though. I will be in attendance.
You'll be there. I'll need you to form a report. So will the Wisconsin Michigan State game. Both all going to be on Peacock. That doubleheader. I hate that this year.
The Big Ten is really going to have to make me pay for the cock, aren't they?
It's $2 a month, right, for students. We're gonna breeze past that. That never happened. I think it's $2 a month for students. I'll probably just fork it over for basketball season, but it's kind of infuriating that's a thing. Wednesday doubleheader. Not particularly excited for Penn State, Maryland, or Nebraska, Minnesota. Really at all. I don't even want to talk about it. Ohio State at Penn State on Saturday. Another one that I'm not super engaged in. Michigan, Iowa on Sunday. We talked about that briefly. It's going to be a shootout. And then Michigan State, Nebraska. That's one that I will talk about for at least a little bit. Because Nebraska's undefeated right now. And like I said, they've played one of the 6 weakest schedules in America up to this point. But they're 7-0 regardless. They're going to be coming off a Creighton game. So I don't know. You think Nebraska can win? It's at home, right? It's in Lincoln.
It's in Lincoln. I think Nebraska easily has a chance. I mean, Tominaga plays well. If he can probably single-handedly outscore 2 or 3 guys on the Michigan State team, then it comes down to the battle of the bench, which I don't think Nebraska has a long bench, but anything can happen when you play Nebraska in Lincoln.
Yeah, so I don't know if I said the number, 357 in strength of schedule in America. I believe, I might be wrong, there might be new teams this year. Last year, there were 363 teams in Division I. So they would be one of the 7 worst teams, worst schedules thus far. But again, I've mentioned I'm excited about Nebraska ball this year. I'm in on Nebraska ball being a potential last 4-in team. And so that's something exciting to keep an eye out for. Something I'm kind of more excited, because it's still December, about the non-conference games that are coming. Because there are a lot of marquee non-conference games coming up. Starting on Saturday with Marquette at Wisconsin, battle for the state of Wisconsin, in Madison. So that'll be helpful. But we watched Marquette against Illinois and Marquette against Purdue. And so we'll kind of see where Wisconsin lays on that scale after this game. But this Marquette team's just really good. I don't have anything else. Yeah.
Were you at the game when they played Illinois?
I didn't go, but I watched the whole thing. I was at home watching it.
Yeah, because I watched it on TV, so I just have that kind of perspective. But I know it's always different when you watch teams play in person rather than on the television. Yeah. But yeah, I think Marquette it's one of Shaka's better teams he's had during the regular season. Let's see what he can do with it. They
won the Big East last year. They lose one starter in Omax Prosper, but Tyler Kolek is the reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, and yeah, we've talked about that. Chucky Hepburn's a good defender. I don't think he's going to take Kolek out of the game. That's in a matchup I'm excited for as well. I love Oso Ighodaro on Marquette. I don't know how much of them you've watched. He is about 6'8", but he plays their 5. Just a freak athlete. That is one of my favorite positions to watch in college basketball is the freaky athletic, high vertical, strong, bulky guy that can't shoot. That's like an undersized 5. Kind of the KJ Adams role at Kansas and Ighodaro now at Marquette. That's my favorite guy to watch on the court at all times.
Yeah, Ighodaro is he's so interesting. He's like a skinny, quick post guy that, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, but he's so good at it.
It's like Brandon Clark at Gonzaga was a prime example of this. he plays the 5 because he doesn't have offensive skill particularly, but again, like can jump. He has a vertical and he's strong, and so I love that position, and he's a game changer. He has first round hype in recent mock drafts. He's kind of shot up those boards. And to be honest, I don't know what Wisconsin's answer to him is going to be, because Crowell is a good he's a good like shot blocker, rim protector, but he's not quick enough to go out and guard him. And Tyler Wall is not going to be able to match up with him physically. So that's I mentioned the point guard matchup. That's another one to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, I think the strategy for that game is going to be Wisconsin is going to should have like a rotating cast and kind of just see what you can do without having anybody foul out trying to guard him.
Yeah, it's going to be the type of matchup to where maybe he gets a bunch of your guys into foul trouble, but you're not super worried about it, because if you can get him into foul trouble on the other side, then that takes the matchup out of the game. That is the approach I'd take at guarding him. All right, Michigan, Oregon, kind of talked about that. Creighton, Nebraska. Creighton at Nebraska. Again, I mean, we just mentioned Nebraska's strength of schedule and the Creighton team. I think Nebraska can do it. It's at home. I think it's possible. I don't think they will. I think they can. I'm going to give them a 18% chance to pull this one out at home.
If I had not seen the final score, or if that game had not been played from Colorado State Creighton, you take that off their schedule, I think there's absolutely no way that Nebraska can win this game. Creighton is solid. They already beat Iowa. They're going to be pretty good. But you put that in there and it leaves a little doubt, and they're on the road. And you never know the one night that Nebraska can go off.
The issue with that argument is that game did happen. And so I think that's what I love. I love the take the certain, games out, and this team's incredible. But I mean, that game happened. You have to take that into account.
100%.
Nebraska doesn't pose a huge threat to me defensively, I don't think. But maybe it's a bad shoe night. That's the thing. If we're talking football, the question that I ask so often is, do they have a chance to pull this one out? And that doesn't really make any sense in basketball context, because any team can win any game. And the perfect example is the Fairleigh Dickinson Purdue game. That Fairleigh Dickinson team, and I've said this, countless times, was not the best team in the worst conference in college basketball. And they beat the best team in the best one of the second best conference probably. So anyone can beat anyone. There's always a chance. Let's talk about the Jimmy V Classic. Florida Atlantic plays Illinois at 5:30 on Tuesday. That game will be on television for everyone. You do not have to subscribe to ESPN. Unlike the Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, all those games. Those games are on Peacock. This game's on ESPN. I think Florida Atlantic, as much as I don't want them to be, I think they might be on fraud watch as well.
I think Florida Atlantic is legit.
I feel like
they
we've
brought
kind of
all their guys back from last year after everything that they did.
They did, and they won that ESPN Events Invitational that Penn State got swept in. They beat A&M, which is that's a great one. They beat Virginia Tech. They beat Butler, and so I think they're okay. I'm glad that they're. I don't know. I watched them lose to Bryant as well, which that's kind of alarming. I'm curious. I think I like this Florida Atlantic team, but I think they might be a fraud, potential fraud.
Well, I guess we'll find out on Tuesday when Illinois falls back out of the rankings.
Yeah, whatever. We'll see if they do. Then I'm excited for that game as well. I really don't know what to say about Illinois, because you take a look at their schedule thus far this season, and they've beaten up on a lot of low major teams, and they've played one high major game against Marquette, who's really, really good. So this Florida Atlantic game will be a good litmus test to see where they stand compared to a second tier power. Rutgers plays Wake Forest. Don't really care. Iowa State. Talked about that a little bit. Back to Illinois against Tennessee at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Tennessee is scary. I know they've lost like 3 of their last 4 or something. But those
They
games
played good teams.
were Kansas and Purdue and at Carolina. So 4-3 with an asterisk. They beat up on Wisconsin, beat them by 10 earlier in the season. This Tennessee team is really good, and I know with Rick Barnes coaching that they're not going to be an Elite Eight Final Four team. That's just like the Rick Barnes tax when he's your coach. But regular season, this team terrifies me, and I think they might be the best team in the country, even with 3 losses right now.
Well, and their losses are Purdue, Kansas, and North Carolina. It's not like they're losing to Joe Schmoes.
No, absolutely not. They're 3 losses. They've played the toughest Power 5 schedule thus far. Like, there are all the teams, the top 5 teams in strength of schedule, I just checked that as well, are all teams that are low majors that are just getting a ton of bye games and making a bunch of money. Like Texas Southern does this every year. Texas Southern comes out of their non-conference schedule about 2-10, with their 10 losses being to like the top 10 teams in the country. And then whenever they win the SWAC, which they do about every year now, they make the field, and it's like, oh, this team, they've played a lot of these good teams. But yeah, so outside of those teams, Tennessee has played the toughest schedule in the country, the toughest real schedule. But yeah, just like by matchups, I don't think that we have horrible matchups for them. I think they match up with us very well. That might be another, brick fight, 1st to 50 type game, because Tennessee guards, that's just what they do. So yeah, how about a neutral site on Saturday in Toronto, Bama and Purdue. That's going to be another test for Purdue. They've got a kind of a tough schedule coming up. I mean, after playing in the Maui, they did this.
Nothing
last
is
year
really
too,
tough after playing in the Maui.
Yeah,
You played those 3 teams in 3 days back to back to back.
But yeah, last year they ran through a buzzsaw in the non-conference. This year they're doing the same thing. And they didn't lose last year, but I don't think Alabama's going to beat them. The 2 1 seeds from last year. Not that means anything, but
yeah, I don't think Alabama's is going to put up too much of a fight. I think Purdue probably wins this game easily. I'm just not impressed with Alabama.
yeah,
It's nothing saying that Purdue is like insane, which I'm sure I think they are, but I think it's more that I'm just not as impressed with Alabama.
I think that if Bama can somehow pull this neutral site game off against Purdue, then I think we know by the transitive property that Ohio State's the best team in the conference, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
Because the transitive property is the end all be all of college basketball.
Yeah, of course. Auburn at Indiana, that game is not going to be any fun at all. It's being played in Atlanta. I'm going to pull up the Auburn roster here while I'm at it. I know they still have Janai Broome, so him and Khalil Ware, that's going to be a fun matchup. Yeah, Katie Johnson. I recognize some of these names. I don't know. They are 5-1. What tournament do they play in? They have one?
I couldn't tell you. I don't watch SEC midseason tournaments, to be honest.
They lost to Baylor in their opening game. I watched most of that game. But outside of that, they beat up on a bad Notre Dame team. They beat St. Bonaventure. They beat Virginia Tech. This team's all right. They'll probably beat Indiana in Atlanta, I think. We'll see.
Atlanta's basically a home game for Auburn. I mean, it's like 3 hours.
True. And then we got Wisconsin, Arizona, which we touched on earlier. There are going to be some tough matchups for Wisconsin in that game. Caleb Love.
Yeah, I don't know that Arizona can make it out of that one.
We're gonna know how good Arizona is compared to the conference, because they also will run up against Purdue the following Saturday, which we'll have a new episode up by then, I think. That'll be after our finals, I think. When are your finals?
My last final's on the 13th.
Okay, so we'll be good. We'll film an episode before that, but they already played Michigan State on Thanksgiving. They play Wisconsin. They play Wisconsin on Saturday, the 9th, and then Purdue on the 16th, and then they play Alabama and Florida Atlantic. So there again, all these top teams are getting buzzsaw schedules, which is I'm a fan of it personally. I love good college basketball in November and December. In the last game, we got the battle for New Jersey, Rutgers against Seton Hall. I don't know. You got anything on that?
I didn't get to watch a lot of what Seton Hall had done this year. Are they doing anything interesting?
They lost to USC and they lost to Iowa. They went 0-2 in that San Diego tournament.
Then it could be an interesting game because I mean Rutgers isn't great, but they're not.
It's
horrible.
It's in Newark. So Seton Hall's the home team. So there will be no rack juju in that game. No rack magic. So I don't know. Incredible slate of games, regardless of how well anyone plays. The slate is very good. Can't disagree with that. Yeah, I mean that's all we had. Taylor, you got anything that you want to add here at the end? Anything you want to talk about?
I just want to give one shout out to a homie, Wolverine Corner on Twitter, for giving us a shout out last week. Or would it have been 2 weeks ago? But at this point, it was whenever we released our last episode.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
We got a little shout out on the Twitter, so I just want to, reciprocate the love on the pod for him.
Sure, absolutely. We appreciate it. Absolutely. Give him a follow. If you're here from him, give us a follow, please. But yeah, that's massive that we have a Michigan fan page that loves us.
And if you didn't see it today, we were on a back and forth with Wolverine Corner about he posed the question, "What is your favorite podcast?" And I just gave a little shout out to the B1G Watchdogs, and he responded with "same." So
thanks, WC.
Just so you know, we are Wolverine Corner's #1 podcast.
I'm not a Michigan fan, but I will align with these two, and I am wearing my Duncan Robinson Miami Heat jersey. What is it? What is it? The T-shirt jersey? What is it called?
The jersey.
Jersey. That's what I was looking for. The Debo jersey. Yeah. So yeah, that's all we got. Like we said at the start of the episode, subscribe, share with your friends that are interested in Big Ten basketball or not interested in Big Ten basketball. We don't really care. I feel like we can make people interested in Big Ten basketball. And that's
at least that's the goal of the pod.
A joy of what we do is making people enjoy Big Ten basketball. Yeah, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, follow us on TikTok. All the links are in the description. Thank you guys for listening. And we will see you guys in the next one in 2 weeks. ILL.